Hello everyone, welcome back for the second video tutorial. So previously we have done our discussion through how do we execute the aggregation operation for a target, series or an array. Okay, so we are going to start with the new one. So we are going to store the objects of business entity. Now, speaking of business entity, for example, you might want to describe your student information. So it could have the information such as the ID, name, genders, GPA, majors, faculty, and so on. So many information that could be included or embedded within an entity. So therefore, are you going to make like 7 or 6 different information just to, represent the same entity? The answer is not. So we have a new way for doing this. So let's continue with our discussion over here. And now I'm going to save this as another one. So allow me to create a new file for you. So that's going to be code number 2.html. So you can keep this as your backup. And for code number 2, again, I'm going to start with the script tag. Now we go from scratch. Previously, you know how to store the data such as variable of student's name equal to John. Same thing, student.gpa is going to be equal to, let's say, 3.5. But this is not convenient. Imagine you have to support like 10, 20 information. So that means you end up having so many variables. So therefore, in JavaScript, we have the concept of what we call objects notation. So that is used to support different informations of the same entity. So for this example, you have to create 2 variables to support 2 different information of the student. You could do the same thing and call student number 2 equal to, and then you can put the bracket notation. So it's called braces or curly bracket. This one will give you the empty information of student 2. Let me print this out for you so you can see the output. So now if I print out student number 2 as the output, then the output should show just, okay, now I'm gonna have to change my execution as well. So instead of code 1, now we move on to code 2. Okay, here we go. So you can see that the output of your JavaScript in the console area show you empty object. What is object? Object is basically the representation of your business entity. We're talking about the student entity. So therefore, this is how you define the empty objects. The student now doesn't have any information at all. Now inside here, if you want to start putting information for students such as its cover, names, and GPA as well, then you expand your bracket here. Inside the brackets, then you have to put pair of information and the value. So this is going to be the comment in JavaScript. So we use double slash to make comments. So this is not gonna be considered as the part of your code, but it's there for your visual expression of your comment. Okay. All right. Now, for example, you want to define name equal to John. So in this case, you can just copy this downward here. But hey, in object notation, you cannot use equal. We use colon. That's one thing. So over here, we say that we already have the name as the information of student 2, and John is going to be the value or data for this information. So if you print this out right now, you can see that now it gives you object notation saying this object now represents the student, and this student have one information, which is name, and that name is John as the data. Now let's go for the second data element here. So I'm going to again just copy this and then put it down here and change this to be colon. So now we got second pair of this information, but hey, when you look at this, it say no, you still have some error in your code. That's because it expected comma. So each pair of information and the data must be separated by comma. You can put it right here. You can put it right here, up to you. Okay. All right. Now with this inclusion, then objects now will support both names and GPA information. So if speaking of this representation, now you can answer yourself that student 2 now have 2 information and 2 data. This data is to support this information, and this data is to support these informations. All right, let's go further. Just imagine that you want to keep putting data in here. You can go and do it right now. You can have a major equal to finance, for example. And the output of this student number 2 will be just the same object, but now you got one more information, which is the major. Okay, so speaking of this, you can see that now you have just to remember only one variable, which is student 2. And whenever you want to have access to any information, you can say student 2, I want you to print out the whole thing, or I want you to print out just some information. So therefore over here, I want to print out the information of the name. So I put dot name. So the dot is basically used as the accessing operator to access information from this object. And therefore the output of this will show you a single data based on this information, comparing to whenever you print out the whole objects, it shows you the whole structure. Now in this case, it's become very simple. So instead of having separate variable like right here, then you can just have a single variable that contains the whole object structure. So from now on, whenever you see the brackets beginning and the end like this, and you got a pair of information in here, this is what we call object notation. One more time, object notation. This is how you define the structure of your business entity. Okay, so you can have another student. Let's say you can copy this, the whole thing here, and then you can define student number 3. And let's say you put Katie's GPA equal to 3, and her major is finance or accounting. Okay, let's put accounting here. And the output is now giving you the same, because we are now using the same information from the same objects. So let's put this student 3 as different reference, and it gives us different value as well. Okay, so this is how you create the objects that represent the business entity. You can think about any business entity like products that have quantity, price, QTY, name, product code, and so on. So that's what we call business entity. For each entity, you have different pair of information and value in this case. Okay, so this is what we call object notation when you have brackets. All right, let's move on to another topic. So in this case, we want to store a collection of objects. Okay, so previously you have learned how to create the collection of objects by using square brackets, and then you put each element one by one separated by comma. Whenever you want to support something similar to this, except for instead of having basic type like number and text, I would like to support objects. Therefore, over here, we can go down, and right now we already have student number 2 and student number 3. Then I can go ahead and now put another variable here. I can say students with s equal to square brackets, and then I can simply put student number 2 as the first reference, the student 3 as the second reference or element. And whenever I type console.log to print out students, then the output should give me the different structure from the previous one, because now you can see that the previous printout just one object. So you have the brackets representation as the curly brace or curly bracket. Now, when you print out a collection, it print out the whole thing here. So you in here is represent the collection with square bracket first, and inside each element, because it's no longer just a simple text or number, it is the representation of business entity. So it used the bracket to represent an object. So therefore over here you got the object representation, and in this case we have 2 different elements for this. Okay. Now you can also add this at the runtime, meaning over here you know how many elements you want at this time, but at the runtime you want to add it here. How do we do this? Well, for example, with the same collection of students, so you can consider this as the collection or list or array. Okay, so you can say, why don't you give me another one? So we say push. Push is to add the new student into the same list. And therefore, you can just put with the new object notation here. And inside this notation, you can put name equal to Amy. And then you can have GPA equal to 4, and you can have major equal to computers, for example. And in this case, when you print this out, okay, let me move this and put it down here. You should see 3 different elements or 3 different objects inside the same list. Now let me give you the output. Here we go. So over here, first we define that there are going to be two elements or 2 objects inside this collection. And then line number 23, we say that we want to put or add the new objects or new students into the same list. So after this is executed, after this is done, then when you print it out, obviously you're going to get 3 different elements as the output. Okay. You can also add different objects at the same time. For example, you can just use positional input parameters to add another one in sequence. So therefore, instead of Amy, I can say that's going to be Lucy. And let's say we put these changes a little bit for computer as well. And therefore, you can see we got 4 different objects. So that means you can keep adding this in sequence in terms of the input parameter here as well. Okay, and separate them by comma. All right, and keep in mind that that push is available because this variable is a collection. All right, what else? Once you understand about this concept, now let's go ahead and say right now we already have 4 different students inside our list. We want to perform the same thing. So we want to go for data aggregation operations. So previously, when you perform these data aggregations, you use something like making variable at the top and use the loop. We're going to use the same thing. Okay, so let's go from scratch. So now data operation for, I would say, aggregations operation for collection, for the collection of object. So it's just not this is not like a text or number anymore, it's the object. Now how do we make a total finding of all objects? So what is going to be the same thing. So you can say that console.log, okay, there are, okay, and then put $signs and bracket in here and say that it's going to be students.range. So it's going to give us how many students are there in the list students. And you also have to replace this double quote with this. Okay, and then you can say there are students in this case. And that will give you the output equal to there are 4 students in the list. Okay, next we want to find, let's say maybe total GPA from students. So therefore, total GPA is going to be found out by using first, we say var total GPA equal to 0. And as you can see now, we got 2 different words. I use the camel case naming convention again. The first word is lowercase, subsequent word, the starting letter should be uppercase letter. Now over here, then you can say we're gonna use the enhanced loop. So for and then brackets. Somebody asked me also that should I put semicolon at the end of this? You should not. Should I put semicolon at the end of this? You should not. Okay, so that's the rule. And this is just to specify the beginning of the for. This is the end of the for. Inside this is what we call looping body. Okay, so it's gonna be loop many times, depends on the condition right here. So to put looping condition, we say off, and then we look at this list. So we say off students. And then over here, each time you're gonna get students. So let me put the nickname for this to reference to each student. So let's say S, and we're gonna make variable declaration for this as well. And then what we want is to find out total GPA. So we say, hey, total GPA, could you please pass equal? Now, unlike in the previous methods that you work with the basic data type, you can just put like that, okay? But now we are accessing information of that object. So we say s.gpa in this case. And you can now copy this and change this a little bit. So we say total GPA is, and instead of this variable, then you can put total GPA, and you can take this off, and that will give you the output equal to total GPA is equal to 13. Now that is finding total. What about average? Then you can also print out average GPA right here. So you can print out average GPA, and you can perform it over here. So it's going to be total GPA divided by how many of them. So it's going to be students S divided by dot range, because we know that this will return return 4 as the output. So 13 by 4 should give you the value equal to 3.25. So that's the average GPA for this class. Okay, what about finding minimum value and maximum value? Same thing. So if you want to find who got the highest GPA, then we start up with this. We say var highest GPA equal to a small value at the beginning. Then you construct the for loop, and inside the for loop you put var student of student S. So we say we're going to loop each time we pick up each student one by one, and then we examine that student one by one as well by putting this if condition, that if S dot GPA is greater than the highest GPA, what we want to do is we want to update the highest GPA equal to that student GPA. And at the same time, we want to know who are they as the candidate, right? So therefore, at the beginning, it is good if you can have a candidate. So we say candidate equal to null. So in JavaScript, meaning candidate is assigned to no one yet. Now, if this is the case, we assume that, oh, when we look at this, because this student have GPA higher than the highest GPA, so we're going to say the candidate now will be equal to this student. So we put S as this result. Now the second time, if the second student have higher GPA than the first one, this condition will be true again. And it's going to reassign, the second this GPA to the highest GPA and assign the second student to the candidate. Now next time, if suppose assume that the third one have less GPA comparing to the second one, then this condition will not be true, and it's gonna just ignore the function the condition body and then loop and get another one. And let's say that if the last one have the higher GPA than the second one, this condition will be true again, and this will be updated, and you end up having both updated, including highest GPA itself, which is the number, and the candidate, which is the object. Now by having these two informations, then now you can go ahead and simply say that I want to print out who got the highest GPA. Log, okay, student with the highest GPA is, and then you can put this in between, and again that's going to be this operator, which is this and this. You say that this is going to be candidate dot name. Okay, now that's the result, and you can see that now student with the highest GPA is Amy. So you can also put another information about GPA itself with GPA equal to, and then you put the question dollar signs and put candidate dot highest GPA dot GPA. You got two choices. Either just put this right here, or you can just use the value from the highest GPA as well. All right. Now let me output this, and you can see it shows the correct answer. Now to support the minimum value, therefore we can go ahead and now do the same thing. So over here, let me scroll to this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to reuse this one. Okay, I will reuse this, and then putting this down here, and now change this logic a little bit. So instead of highest GPA, we say lowest GPA equal to. Now if you go with the lowest case, the initial value should be very big one. So let's say that I try with maybe 10, because we know the maximum GPA in the class is about 4, so 10 is higher than that. And you flip this number a little bit, so it's going to be less than, and this will be low GPA, and again also this is going to be lowest GPA. Okay, and then you can say lowest GPA equal to this, and that's it. Now the output should show who got the lowest one, which is Lucy. So Lucy with GPA equal to 2.5. All right, so I think in this tutorial, for the second video tutorial, you have learned how do we make use of object notation. Okay, let's make a quick review so that you don't need to worry about making a lot of variable like this. You can just contain it within one variable reference, and you can put the pair of information and data like this. You can also develop a collections of objects this way using the same collection operator with the square brackets. You can also use the push to add more objects. In here, you can just single add new objects one at a time, or you can add multiple of them as well. And you have learned how to use the same looping technique, just like in the previous video, to perform the looping technique, but target the new object type, which is not a primitive type like text or number, but is object. Okay, you learn the same techniques to find the aggregation, including total, average, max, and min as well. So I think this is all for the first module. So we are going to talk about the second module in the next video tutorial. Okay, in the next video tutorial, once we have the data, we want to perform another operation, such as we want to sort the student by GPA, print them in orders. We want to filter out some students that have GPA below some value as well. So how do we do this? Well, let's talk about that in the new video tutorial. Thank you.